Great. Well, good morning, everybody. Thanks for joining us this morning for this discussion about how we can connect AI development to wider public benefit. My name's Jess Montgomery. I'm Director of AI at CAM, which is Cambridge University's mission on AI for science and society. I'm delighted to be joined this morning by an esteemed panel with great expertise from policy, technology, sustainable development, and philanthropy. And maybe in a moment I'll ask the panel to introduce themselves, but just to frame this morning's discussion. Today at the AI House, there's going to be a collection of panels about breakthrough opportunities in AI. It'll be exploring the range of things AI could do. But to start, we wanted to kick off with a discussion about what we want or need AI to do. So thinking about what we want these technologies to do to really deliver public benefit and to connect technology development to real-world impact. So maybe before we get into questions, I'll just ask each of my panelists to briefly introduce themselves. Andrzej, do you want to kick us off?
Hello, everybody. My name is Andrzej Szeptycki. I'm Deputy Minister of Science and Higher Education in Poland, and I'm also a professor at the Faculty of Political Sciences and International Studies at the University of Warsaw.
Hi, I'm Neil Lawrence. I'm Professor of Machine Learning at the University of Cambridge.
I'm Godliver Omugisha. I'm from Uganda right now. It's a privilege to be here, and I'm a researcher in artificial intelligence. I'm also a professor at the University of Busitema. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Vilas Dar. I lead the Patrick J. McGovern Foundation, which is a philanthropy focused on the idea that AI can be more than just a tool. It can be a transformation of our society in positive ways.
Great. So we're going to have a few questions to the panel, and then we'll be handing to you in the audience for further questions. And to start, I'd like to invite each of our panelists to reflect on why it is we're seeing this disconnect between our technological capabilities and our ability to deliver public benefit from AI. So one of the things we consistently hear from public dialogues is that people have aspirations for how AI could benefit them in healthcare, in education, in public services, but a sense that AI isn't really delivering on that promise yet. So maybe Vilas, to start, why do you think we're seeing this disconnect between AI and public benefit?
You know, Jess, we spent 5,000 years as a human civilization warning each other about what might happen if we ever got godlike powers. We wrote mythologies and stories, we built religions, we created faith to make sure that we protected ourselves from what might happen if we ever aspired to do things that were greater than ourselves. And then in a period of 50 years, we somehow sat down and said, you know what, we're going to put all that aside and we're going to figure out how to build things that actually make us so powerful that we can begin to transform the world around us. What happened along the way was we lost sight of the fact that there was an entire spectrum of moral, philosophical, grounded thought that guided us to make better decisions. And as we sent some of our smartest minds off to go and build amazing technologies, we didn't also exert the social contract and say to them, make sure you remember where we have been and what we have done. We see it in our society today. There's no fault attached to it. But on one side, we admire with such, fandom those who sit on top of organizations that are scientific, that are research-oriented, that build great things. And then we lament the fact that the rest of our world is stuck in the problems that we have. It strikes me that it's a problem of approach, that if we were to actually converge and bring together these two things, this incredible capacity for human technical innovation, with maybe the same expectation that we might innovate how we think about our institutions, our political structures, our expectations of each other, we might be able to do something totally different. And I'll just end with this. I'm struck this week, I'm struck often in the work that we do, that there's always a response to what I've just said, which is, but the inertia of the moment is showing us that we're actually just diverging in those two things. But inertia isn't inevitability. Just because that's the moment we're in doesn't mean we can't make a different choice. Now, I think the responsibility for making that choice is never going to sit with a few leaders of tech companies. It won't sit with elected officials. It'll sit with all of us engaging in a participatory way to say that science and technology isn't so foreign that we have to let somebody else do it, but that we have to make it a part of our decision making.
Great, thank you. Godliver, what's your perspective?
Yeah, thank you. So I think this is the time that we should really be talking about the global, AI and how it will affect different continents and communities. So for me, I come from a community whereby we have a lot of people who really highly rely on agriculture for their lives. So you imagine majority of the farmers in Africa or in sub-Saharan Africa are really smallholder farmers. Think about a room like this times 6. That is the entire land for the family, who are about 4 to 6 people. And so these effects of climate change, sometimes you have like whole long droughts. You have long droughts about 5 to 6 months, and you find someone didn't save anything from the last period, from the last season. So if you're hit by droughts in such a way, and you also find you have challenges of crop pests, which are a very big threat right now, that you plant crops for about 6 months, you harvest nothing. So this is a very big threat for the African community, that we can't stay behind, looking at, seeing how the rest of the world is really growing in terms of AI, and we can't do anything about it. So at the moment, there is pressure from our societies to see what can we do. And we are very few people who can do this because the capacity is very low. Think about the universities. We have very, very little skills. Okay, we have professors, but some of them are not into this line. So it's time that we empower our communities, our students, and we see funding come to us, come to Africa, so that we can solve our own problems, because we already know these unique challenges. We don't want to rely on technology that has been enforced on us, that we should. So we want to empower communities, our students, and everyone. Government should come in to see that we can really identify these problems, solve them early enough before it really gets too late for us. Thank you.
I thought 2 excellent openings, and see if I can do a bit to try and connect them. I mean, Godliver works in a broader organization, Data Science Africa, and I'm privileged to have known Godliver since 2013. And watching the way that organization works, it's a community that shares challenges, shares understanding, shares expertise, and builds sustainable solutions within those communities to deliver on those problems. And it sits in quite stark contrast to a lot of the development work we see, which is solutions conceived in New York, London, Paris, Geneva, Davos, and imposed from the outside under the assumption that, oh, we're richer, therefore we must know better. And it really sits with exactly what Vilas was saying around what's happened in terms of our understanding of who we are, and how that understanding has shifted to those with the wealth as if that is the marker of who we want to be. And I think it reflects the broader challenge that we're seeing really. I think it's omnipresent already, but it's perhaps being distilled, and we're at a fork in the path whether we could make this worse or whether we could make this better, which is a separation between what I think of as the macroeconomic forces and what I think of as the microeconomic demand. So you've got Godliver talking about communities, farmers with plots only 6 times the size of this room, who are threatened by crop diseases, and I know Godliver does a lot of work on cassava disease. So the demand is for solutions that are tailored to these people who are subsistence farmers, who, when they have crop problems, they're living on the edge, and as climate changes, that pushes them over the edge. And the technologies we provide, developed wherever in Silicon Valley, could support these solutions, but don't, because they're not developed with those communities in mind. But that's merely a distillation of the same challenge that we face across wider society, that we're not developing technologies that are supporting nurses. We're not developing technologies that are supporting teachers. We are not developing technologies that are supporting workers in our cities who were promised, if you learn how to do this, you'll have a career in this area, and then having those promises taken away. And I think it's because of this much larger separation between where the money is going, which is about capturing our attention and driving economic wealth through that attention capture, and where the actual demands are, which are often in areas who have less representation economically and therefore are less represented with the product of the technology. And I don't think that's a new thing. That's something that's been going on for like however many years, perhaps 30 years. But I think the opportunity now is with AI, we could steer that back in the direction, because what we see in the type of projects that Godliver's doing and her colleagues is a series of projects where people on the ground are empowering themselves with this technology and delivering their own solutions rather than waiting for them to be imposed from the outside. And we can learn from that and do the same thing within our own left-behind communities. And rather than sort of looking at our engagements with colleagues across the world as we are teaching them, for me, it's so often that they are teaching us.
Andre?
On a general level, I would say we have, especially in the EU, we have too many regulations and not enough money. Especially after yesterday's declaration of President Donald Trump on how much money he would like to put into AI, we could say, I mean, we are done. But this question of regulations and money does not only apply to AI, it applies, well, to science in general, at least in my part of Europe and to several other areas. So I think there is another major point which is much more relevant, especially to AI and society. This is the fact that most of the people, in particular at the academia, when I'm working, they are still not really aware of the importance of AI and of how we can use it. In December 2023, just before joining the ministry, I've enrolled for a training at the university on AI for scholars. So basically the training consisted of giving us the names of different apps you can use. ChatGPT, DeepL, Midjourney, and of showing us, funny pictures Midjourney would generate. I mean, I've become a fan of Midjourney. I'm using it, but it is a stage of, AI is funny. AI is, some kind you can play with it, and so on. I remember when I've discovered World Wide Web around 1995, 1997, and I've started using it as a researcher on a day-by-day basis around 2002. So for 5 years, it was for me kind of, something funny, something to check once a week, once a month. And I have the feeling we are now, at least most of my colleagues, at the same stage. We know it exists. We use it from time to time, but we have no idea how to use it, especially, I'm coming from, as I've said, from political science field. So in social sciences and humanities, we don't have maybe as much as astronomers, biologists, I don't know. We don't have large data sets we could work on. We've used for years to go to the library, to open some kind of documents, textbooks, and so on. And how to jump from this stage. Okay, we have online libraries. That's a success already, okay? Not to go to a physical library. But how to jump from reading by ourselves different texts to using AI to read them, to aggregate them. This is something which I deeply believe that most of my colleagues still don't know. And this is this next step from Midjourney funny pictures to really using it in science, in our case. This is the step we still need to do.
So we have this sense that there is an alternative model of AI innovation out there that could really deliver for people, for science, for society, but the deck is still stacked against the people working on those projects, whether that's because of a lack of skills, of funding, the issues of accessing data or accessing an open public infrastructure for innovation. I'd welcome reflections on what can we do to create more space for those types of bottom-up, community-driven projects that we've mentioned so far. Would any panelists like to come in there?
Sure, happy to. I think for me, the starting point is a rejection of some of the easy narratives, right? The first is the idea that all of AI is being driven by a small set of tech companies that build very large foundation models. Our work around the world, we are one of the largest funders, but also partners on AI, involve things like working with communities exactly like the ones you described, Oliver. Like working with small farming communities to say, what are the local geographic, meteorological, soil-based conditions? How do we build predictive models that actually help figure out what their best opportunities are for planting, harvesting, and market access? I tell a story sometimes about drunken elephants and tipsy elephants in the Indian countryside. Elephants, as it turns out, can go in the forest and they'll eat lots of things, but what they'll actually seek out is fruit that's dropped from the trees and started fermenting into forest alcohol. These elephants eat these fruits, they get a little tipsy, they get a little hungry, and unfortunately, at that point, they start actually violating some of their own standards about when and how they go into human settlements. So you've got a bunch of drunk elephants roaming the forests of India, going into rice fields and like having a midnight snack. Some of you might have done this last night in Davos. The elephants are doing it in India. We worked with a community and a set of graduate students from a local university to figure out a low-cost solution of sensors, tying into a model that allowed for bioacoustic monitoring of these elephant noises, tied into a deterrence mechanism that actually just flashes lights and makes noises and makes sure that elephants aren't going into these fields. Okay, that's a story. Two things about that story that I think are really important. One, at no point along the way did it require the use of a massive foundation model with API costs and all of the other things. It was something that could be done quite locally. The second, the actual result of that tool set was, instead of some of these small families saying, I'm going to leave my 13-year-old daughter or son at the edge of the field all night with a drum, so if the elephants come, they can scare them away, now have a technical solution instead, which means that child is now getting a night's sleep and in the morning getting sent off to school. These are the narratives around where AI actually impacts people's lives. And it's not to say that we don't need large foundation models or we don't need significant supercompute, but it just reinforces the idea that in an AI world that we live in today, we've already done so much technological innovation that we have opportunities to transform the lives of hundreds of millions or billions of people using what we have today. So where are we going to drive the investment and capacity and mechanisms to do that? Well, I'm sorry to say, it doesn't look like the private sector and the private markets are going to do it, which I think creates a new responsibility for two actors. One is civil society and nonprofit organizations that work closely with these communities at the front lines of vulnerability to actually become experts at AI, to become the kinds of organizations that can deliver solutions in partnership with the communities they work with. And the second is the obligation for governments to say, if we think of AI not as a private sector technology, but as a public sector asset, for governments to invest in building AI capacity at scale that lets us go and find these solutions and build them in structured ways that aren't just about pilots and good stories, but about massive platforms that transform lives.
Yeah, thank you so much. So I'll somehow detail the project we are doing in agriculture. So here we empowered small communities, farmers, how they use AI. We had different application, but integrated into one. So here a farmer can, for example, take a picture of what's happening in his garden and do diagnosis on his phone. So when they do that, even us who are on the other control side, we're able to know this region is affected by this or something like that. So with that kind of an application, we realized that farmers are actually, for them, they are really interested to adapt to technologies because one, we really have this, a lot of information gap between communities and which should have been provided, for example, by the government, but we have low capacity or labor to do that. So what we are trying to do at the moment is to work on technologies, I would say, that are low resourced. If farmers are already showing us interest that they are ready to adapt to using a mobile phone to do diagnosis in their garden, so how about if we can work on advanced chips or technologies like spectrometer is one of the things that is leading my research. Because with that, we are able to see that if a plant is scanned, for example, this week, a farmer can know that there is a likelihood that the plant is sick or not sick than waiting after many months to harvest nothing. So that is what we are trying to champion in our region, that if we can have partners come and support these kinds of work that we are trying to do. Because if it works for Uganda, it will definitely work for other regions in the country. And information is data is really a very big deal here. He talked about how can we get data, from communities. It's the communities that will give us data. It's not that we are going to have outside, tools or whatever to come and implement and put them down. But the farmers, the communities, are the ones who are supposed to give us the information that we need. So for me, I find that interesting, also in line with what you're saying. and also with what he's saying, how best can we empower our communities to give us the resources that we need. Yeah, I think I'll add on from that later after.
No, I think really great points being made all around. And I think the question now becomes, well, it seems important that there's a cultural change in the way that we're viewing technology in order to make this happen at scale, because we can mention these examples where it's working, we can see that they're successful, but then we can also, as we hear from Andre, the common situation where people see this technology as a plaything and don't have a good sense of how to integrate it in their lives. And from my own perspective, I see this as a characteristic of digital technologies in the story so far. And, you know, Vilas mentioned 5,000 years. If we go back 5,000 years ago to the development of writing, the first people who could write were the scribes, and the scribes gained a great deal of power, and in order to do anything, you had to have a scribe. Now, over time, literacy increased, and that power was more distributed. But what's happened with software is we've become isolated from the information infrastructure again. So we have information infrastructures imposed upon us, whether in the UK that's the Horizon scandal, or whether the fact that, you know, we can't do simple things like just booking on a website because, it's, you know, anyone who's ever used the British Airways app for trying to check in will know exactly what I'm talking about. You know, and there's very little way around it because the humans have been taken out of the loop. And I think a lot of this is then compounded by big tech companies who are sort of now controlling that information structure through software engineers, also telling us this is too complex for you. And you see them doubling down on that strategy at the moment with CEOs saying this is such a complex technology, only we can control it. And that just means it's a bad technology at the moment, or I would say a poorly designed technology, because the opportunity with this technology is if it does even a tenth of what people claim it's going to do, the first thing it should be able to do is re-empower individual people to be more in control of the machine, to re-empower us to connect with digital technologies and express our will better through the machine. Because if I can talk to the computer for the first time, then everyone can talk to the computer. And although we have challenges with low resource languages and, you know, in areas where people are using code mix languages in Uganda, people are also trying to address those problems. But what does that mean? That we've got to urgently reinvest in our human capital, because we have lost confidence in the people on the ground that they are the right people to be making these decisions. And we see that with the $500 billion investment, the idea in the US that it's going to be OpenAI and, you know, Microsoft and whoever else who deals with the massive social divides in the United States. You know, they are in a very real sense, despite the growth in the US, we see enormous social divides because the results of that growth have not been distributed, you know, to all the places of these traditional industries, whether it was coal mining, steel making, car manufacturing. And these are the people who are upset. And spending $500 billion on the people who in some sense have driven economic growth, but have kept the benefits of that economic growth to themselves is not on its own, I mean, and it may be a wise investment, but it's certainly not on its own going to deal with the enormous social divides we see in the US and we see increasingly in Europe as well. So alongside these investments, we have to invest in people. We have to sit down with people, understand what their roles are, as God Liver does with the farmers, understand how these technologies can help. And as Vilas says, that's very often not, oh, I really need you to train me a foundation model. And very often that's the last answer. Very often it's something smaller or something simpler. Or very often it doesn't even involve machine learning or AI at all. It just, oh, well, we could make this slightly better and that would improve your lives. And those conversations aren't happening. And I want to, you know, we could point the finger at all sorts of people about why this is going on, but I want to take some responsibility here as universities. We are failing in our job to serve societal problems because we're so obsessed with prestige science and getting on the front page of Nature, which of course now DeepMind has shown they're a lot better than us at anyway, but we're losing our raison d'etre, which is to serve society with technological innovation that delivers the solutions that society wants. And unfortunately, in the digital world, all too often, the things that we need to change are just a little bit too trivial for many of us to deal with. Now, universities still do some extraordinary things, but we do need to start, as Vilas, I think, was saying, work more closely with civil society, with industry, with government, with big tech, because I think universities are the only place that have the power to convene the sort of conversations Vilas is talking about, but we haven't stepped up, and we need to change that.
Well, speaking about universities once again, and about science in a more general way, what we are planning as Poland and Polish presidency in the EU Council, we would like the Compet Council to adopt in May some kind of recommendations or conclusions on AI in science. Because EU already has its AI Act, well, kind of general document, but now looking more closely what we should do, how we should work in these areas. There are some 4 or 5 points which, according to our government, this document should tackle. This is, of course, we've mentioned it already several times, the question of educating the people, in particular the students and the scholars, on AI. This is the question of disinformation and cybersecurity. This is, in particular in Poland, we are neighbors of the Russian Federation. This is something of key importance. In a general way, but also in science. If we are to work on any kind of data, we have to be certain that yesterday somebody mentioned during a panel that if you feed AI models from anything which is available, it's feeding shit and producing shit. I'm just quoting. So we want to avoid that. We want to avoid that, in particular in the field of science. And indeed, this information aspect is also of crucial importance in the field of sciences. Think about climate change and people who deny it. Think about anti-vaccination movement. We faced disinformation in these areas before AI came to being, and AI could be used also on another level to promote different fakes. In particular, in the field of science, and here there is another term which comes back quite regularly in the EU. This is the notion of sovereign AI. So we want to know once again who gives us the content, who gives us the results. It mustn't be a kind of black box. You know, that the text you get the text out of it without knowing how it's produced, who produces it. Another important aspect is open access to data, because we want all the scientists to have the best chances, to have equal chances. So that's another point which we would like this EU Act on AI in Sciences to mention. And last but not least, something I already mentioned before, this is the importance of AI for social sciences and humanities, because in this area, once again, we feel a little bit behind our respected colleagues from STEM field.
And that's a challenging and wide-ranging policy agenda we've got to tackle to be able to responsibly develop these technologies. As a policymaker, what do you need from the research and civil society community to help you deliver on that agenda?
Well, from the researchers, we've been talking about that last week in Brussels. We had a seminar on that. We need the content. What precisely I'm taking off my professor's hat. I'm just staying here as a politician. So what do you need concretely to be put in this document? This is one point. And from the civil society, I suppose this is a question especially of different NGOs and so on to promote the education, to get in dialogue with society in general to avoid this gap.
Another thing we talked about last week with the Commission, it's not just the content. I think we need the trust. That's something I really left that session with, is realizing one thing we're failing on in Europe with, I think particularly the way the Commission views researchers, is there's not enough trust placed in the research community that they know what they're doing and they should steer things in the right direction. And maybe that's also the research community's fault. Maybe we haven't done a good enough job in the past. But it strikes me that one of the challenges we face in Europe is that we have such a diversity of capabilities across countries that if we're not trusting each other that we know what we're doing in our different areas and that the strength in this diversity, and I see the Draghi report as having this flaw, that we're risking undermining our diversity by trying to impose a one-size-fits-all across the solution because we don't trust each other to do what we all find is best. We were convening a roundtable the other day on this space in terms of what type of interventions, and there were some voices saying, look, we should be targeting what I would call greenfield innovation, new businesses, that start creating wonderful new revenue streams for the economy. And then another person present was saying, no, we need to look at brownfield innovation. We need to look at existing businesses and how they transform. And of course, the interesting thing was reflecting afterwards, one of these individuals was coming from Finland, which in some sense is really doing amazing stuff on greenfield and can probably build an entire economic future on greenfield. Another individual was coming from Germany, where they're going to have to look very carefully about how existing industries assimilate these technologies. So they were both right. But at the same time, we don't seem to be allowing that diversity to thrive. We seem to be saying, well, centrally, we need to do one thing. And we don't seem to devolve the authority for how these things should be carried out in such a way that allows different European countries to capitalize on our different strengths and combine together to create a whole that is greater than sum of the parts. We just seem to constantly try and mimic perhaps a US model, but then end up with something that undermines our strengths and will never reach their capabilities. We'll never spend 500 billion on infrastructure.
And during your answers to the previous question, we almost started talking about a strategy for scale. And that would encompass policy, partnerships, and people. Would welcome reflections from your work so far. What tangible steps could we take to help scale the successes we've seen so far? What concrete actions should we be taking as researchers, research institutes, or in philanthropy? Vilas.
Ah, great. Well, I want to acknowledge where we're sitting and bring the question back to kind of what we're here to discuss, right? So I think there's plenty of structural indictments and critiques we can make of the system, but let's really just talk about two truths that we have to hold. The first is a sense of agency, that if we start from the assumption that AI can be used to do good things, that we actually want to center that as a priority, then it becomes okay to actually use the language of business. We don't only have to use the language of human rights work and discourse or of civil society and universities. So let's use the language of business and be quite honest about it. To me, the first part of it is, where's the voice of the customer? And the customer in this case is not the consumer. The customer is communities and individuals. It's sometimes governments at scale. It's entire sectors of sustainable smallholder farmers, or those who are artisans in different industries, or those who are trying to navigate the climate impacts on their own villages. Why don't we invest as much into building the mechanisms of hearing the voice of the customer in that space as we do when we try to sell the next widget on the App Store? The second is, where's the accountability for public purpose around technology in that mechanism, right? Companies are often accountable to CEOs and to boards, to shareholders. And because of that, they actually have quite a good forcing function that says solve for profit and nothing else. But if we really think about AI as a tool that can change the world, how do we ensure that we're enshrining in our political structures exactly the same accountability for technologies for public purpose? To do it, and I say this as somebody who's done this my entire life, is itself a personally fulfilling outcome to build something that makes the world better. But what if we actually said, as a society, we expect that of our technologists? That to do it isn't merely a feel-good moment, it's actually a way that you commit to our shared social contract. And maybe the last thing I'll say on this is capital provision, right? This is to get right down into the tactics of it. I've spent the entire week with the CEOs of every major AI company, right? From Arthur Mensch to Bill Gates to Dario to Demis, right? These companies are successful for many reasons. Their research capacity, their technical innovation, but also because we have showered them with so much capital. And yet when I talk to incredible leaders, probably God-liver just like you, who are trying to do incredible work like this, they say, I can barely scrape together enough grant funding or government money or whatever to get access to the basic compute I need. This is a problem that needs to be solved. It needs to be solved with the advocacy of the people in this room, but by those who are holding on to public purses around the world, who have the capacity to invest in this work, who can think of aid not merely as the delivery of food, water, and famine assistance and vaccines, but also driving technical capacity as a part of development assistance, and saying we can build local capacity as a part of our commitment to a rights-based order.
Godliver, Data Science Africa is a great example of building that capacity.
Yes, exactly. So how do we scale? I think that was the question. How do we scale whatever we are doing to, So one of the things I think the challenges we are facing is how do you move the research you've already done in the lab to work to a larger community? Because right now we have very small groups that are participating in this. Perhaps the area of having startups, like having big tech companies come support universities, and also we connect with the industry outside to have more people come on and adapt to this technology, because it's always a fear. They may want to see of course they see the value for the technology, but how you get to a wider community is still a challenge for us as universities. And also, some funding we've always gotten, I would say, funding comes in very small bits. So you find you're stagnant at a certain point. You cannot easily move. You cannot easily get enough products for, So funding is a challenge. So that's why we're here. That's why I'm here, because I was invited by ICANN. ICANN is an international computation and AI network that has seen value in the research that we are doing, that they can protect us, they can, secure funding for us and give us as universities to do wide work. And of course, capacity. Neil came to Makerere when I was a master's student in 2013, and I was just a master's student. That I didn't know anything to do with Python notebook, and it was my first time. So a lot of people right now are like me, who are in bachelor's. And so it's time that we come together through our network. Data Science Africa is one of them, and have also different exchange, programs that if I'm sure that students from Busitema University, Uganda, can easily cross to Europe, maybe to Cambridge, and acquire, all these good skills would help our communities very much. So I think with policy and just use 1 minute. With policy and the risks of how, there is a risk. How can I say it? People are not protected. They don't feel protected. In terms of data, because some projects, people have fears, like health. Someone doesn't know what am I signing? How am I protected? Isn't this project going to, explore, expose me, or, So people need to be protected. Because I told you, we are really an African society. People are getting to know about the things, but so we need a big body to come in, and bodies, or maybe African unions and EUs, and to have good policies on how AI can really benefit all societies with equal rights and all that. Yeah. I would say.
So I think you mentioned the International Compute and AI Network, which was an initiative we launched a year ago, sort of led by the Swiss Call for Trust and Transparency. And I was just reflecting on that and the thing you're saying about security, because I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the organization of Data Science Africa provides that security for a network of universities and researchers across a number of countries which have political instabilities. And one of the things I love about it is it's convened around problems. It's not convened around a particular national interest. It's convened around, it has a set of principles that are like for Africa, by Africa, driven by the problems, which I think are read at the beginning of every meeting. and I've been very, certainly in my discussions in ICANN, I've been very inspired to try and translate some of what you're doing there to bring that security to the international level. But it's also interesting how many pressures there are to move away from that bottom up in terms of the desire of the international community to see things being done in a certain way, which, not that those things are unsuccessful, but it's just this point, to the extent that they've been successful, that success has happened. And to the extent that they're missing things, that's where the enormous gaps are in society. And I think very often when we're looking at international development, it's just driving a dependency culture because it doesn't respect those it's collaborating with. Whereas when I look at Data Science Africa, I find inspiration in terms of how much we could learn. And the key thing in the International Computation and AI Network is we're trying to bridge those two. So we're trying to take the compute, the visibility, the chance to sit here in Davos and talk about these projects, bring that down to what's going on the ground, which is often not, that smooth showcase thing that you can show in front of everyone, because to do real stuff is messy. But we've ended up in a world where people are only showing showcase results, which means that they are typically artificial and typically not making capability changes on the ground. And this is what we need to address across the board, because there's this big difference between the type of project that you show to a minister, with all due respect, Andre, and the type of project that's actually making a difference. Because it's easier to showcase a project than to be making the project working on the ground. And I think the way out of that, though, is that by shared experience, by working together and seeing it work, and by building those networks of trust between each other, in the end, those things that work on the ground will last a long time, and the people who do them will spread the message. And in that way, you get the scaling you need. And I very much appreciate everything Vilas said. And as you add in that dose of the voice of the customer and that understanding of where these things are coming from, I think we can be highly optimistic about the future if we rebuild the confidence of the type of institutions we're talking about.
I would like to mention two concrete projects we are involved in of very different nature. The one is called the Unified Anti-Plagiarism System, which we've recently expanded to also include an anti-AI mechanism. This unified anti-plagiarism system is used by some 400 Polish university and para-university institutions, 100,000 users, including myself as a professor. Well, personally, I'm very happy about this AI add-on because, once again, 20 years ago, I remember my students, bringing me papers directly copy-paste from the internet. But after 2 years, it quickly disappeared because most of the people understood that it's very easy to Google and to check the copy-paste text. So now I'm receiving sometimes papers, 50–80% AI generated. So once again, the answer is I'm sorry, but it's not your production. But there is a problem, by the way. I would be very glad if you, the community of researchers, could somehow resolve, because now we are already having services, AI services, which humanize AI texts. So we produce texts which are not recognized anymore as AI generated. For example, AI basically doesn't make language mistakes. Orthographic faults. So if you get a system which adds every 5 words, a very basic mistake, then it's seen as a human text, not as an AI text. I've received recently an MA thesis like that, with grammar errors or orthographic errors every 5 words, and the system was very happy. No, it's students' production, not AI. So this is one thing which we are extensively using as science and higher education system. The other thing we are developing in Krakow at the AGH University. We are developing what we call an AI factory. So basically, there is a supercomputer they are developing with our money, which will be available for AI startups, for public entities, private entities. I mean, anybody who is interested in using its services in the field of AI will have access to it. It's already there, but we are paying to make it more powerful. We've recently put some 25 million euros to make it more performance. So, I mean, the bottom problem, plagiarism, the kind of, top thing, AI factory.
Great. I'd now like to open to the floor for questions. If we've got 1, 2, 3.
It's on. Hello. Okay. Thank you. So this has been a very fascinating conversation. I actually just completed a double master's at University of Leeds in December. And it took me several months to find the program that I was looking for because I was interested both in the intersection of sustainability, advanced innovation, and business. And I just happened to stumble upon a professor at the University of Leeds that was advancing this course that's fairly new. It's a Master's in Sustainable Business Leadership. So it's a combined Master of Science in Environment and an MBA. Now, what was missing from that program was more around advanced technology. I've been in technology my entire career, Accenture, NVIDIA, and no, I did not hold on to my stock. Otherwise, I'd be investing in various programs when I left NVIDIA. But as I'm listening to this, one of the things that I'm curious about as I consider a doctorate, and again, being somebody that's been in business and in the world of commerce, lived in Silicon Valley for 16 years, yet I'm intrigued by the possibilities of advanced academic research, is that perhaps what's missing, and I'll try to bring two threads that occurred in my mind as I'm listening to this discussion today, is number one, is it problematic that we continue to think about academic areas of research in silos? So I do a lot of work around advancing girls and women in STEM. And I keep hearing, well, it shouldn't be STEM, it should be STEAM, and putting arts in with the maths and everything. And so should we be advancing a more interdisciplinary way that we're thinking about where academic rigor meets commercial application and community benefits? And that ties back to a panel session yesterday where I was listening. It was about AI, like many other panels here at Davos this year. And they were talking about how more and more large-scale enterprises, technology companies are hiring philosophy majors versus programmers. Because, and this goes back to the second thread, which is where you said, really making sure that students are not leveraging AI as they're doing their studies. But perhaps that's not so bad if they're asking the right questions. Because prompt engineering is something that is very much like, well, it's not about getting the output, it's about making sure that you're asking the questions to be able to get the output. So this all ties back to a little bit of commentary, but also a question of, A, should we be thinking about interdisciplinary approaches? And in the interdisciplinaries, not just subject matter areas from the arts, humanities, to science and math and whatnot, but also bringing more of the business, and not just through partnerships of enterprise and commercial with academia, but intertwining that more purposefully and intentionally. And second to that is, what are your thoughts around, is there a way that we can shift a mindset of not just learning education, but really about making sure that you're answering the right questions and perhaps not penalizing people that use future of AI, Gen AI, for rigor in academic research, so long as they're shifting how they think about the questions to ask.
So that question about interdisciplinary working, Neil, can I throw that to you first?
Sure. It's absolutely vital, but it's very clumsily deployed and understood because both the silos and interdisciplinary are crucial. Industry's actually appalling at long-term thinking, and if it weren't for academia, you would have none of this revolution. I mean, it's entirely, they've spotted it and they extractively mine it. So it's deep thinking academia in silos that has given us this technology. And then to the extent that it's been developed in industry, they copied academic methodologies. But at the same time, you need to bring those deep thinkers together. And that's very hard when they all speak different languages. So in Cambridge at AI at CAM, that's entirely what we're looking at is mechanisms for overlaying the quality and depth of academic investigation with mechanisms that encourage interdisciplinarity but don't force it. Too often it's forced. And the big challenge, for example, with an interdisciplinary PhD is it's actually very difficult to go deep interdisciplinarily. They do it in business schools, but then all too often, as a result, you won't get any of the technical stuff, because the broader you go in terms of business innovation, the harder it is to introduce deep technical understanding in the degree. So it's the old T approach. You know, you need the breadth and the depth, but then all about it is trying to get the font right, so the stem of the T and the breadth of the T actually integrate beautifully together, and that's what gives us the interdisciplinarity.
I think we had a second question here.
Thank you. Very nice discussion. My question is regarding maybe a different title for this session. We had already heard the word capacity, so I would say capacity building, which is something I know from food systems in sub-Saharan Africa as well. So how about open data, open source models? This we have, but I'm missing really open infrastructure for AI. I'm not speaking just like small clusters, small supercomputers, but like really big ones, or something like that big tech has to give 1% of their capacity for research, for sub-Saharan African researchers, for example, because it's not only finding solutions for them, but they also need to have the capacity building among themselves, the skills, and then also their own, finding their own way instead of like implying ours always.
Sure, Godliver.
Yeah, happy. Oh, please go ahead.
No, I think actually that will go more to him than, but I would say it's actually a very big challenge. We don't have infrastructures, and that is an initiative that ICANN has so far seen in the problems that we have to give us, supercomputing where we can run these models. It's very difficult to see. It's even the type of technology that you want to, to be run on the end devices. Well, of course, we shall try to bring it down that should fit on the small devices, but having somewhere to train these big models, big data, and it's still a challenge, still a very, very big gap. If you were to buy some GPUs for the lab, for example, for students to run these models they have, it's very, very difficult. So that's why we need big techs, we need partnerships, and so that we can to try to bridge this gap. Yes, thank you.
Let me just say one quick thing, which I think will track exactly what he said, Godliver. The Secretary General of the UN asked me to join an advisory body. We built a set of recommendations for the United Nations and for all of the member states on AI. And as you quickly pointed out, like one of those key problems and challenges to really recognize the opportunities of AI is broad-based capacity. One of the things that we did as a body over the course of a year of deliberations is ask the question, is this about coming up with single approaches? Do we want to invest in data centers or in compute capacity or in data? And the conclusion was absolutely not. Like, I think the idea is actually a collaboration of many different points of light to allow for local data sets to exist, to manage regional political needs around data sharing, and at the same time build compute capacity that can be shared at extensive scale. You said something that I thought was really interesting. Should we ask private companies to give us 1% of their compute capacity? I think it's an interesting question, but I come at it with a different direction, which is to say, why did we at some point abrogate our responsibility as governments to say we build compute as a public resource? Why don't we actually build something that lets every person on the planet have access, not because a company has decided to give it to us for their CSR, but because we own it, we architect it, we build the solutions on top of it that we need, and we don't say that we're clients of a tech sector, but rather that we're architects of our own digital destiny.
Hi, thank you everyone. That was very inspiring. I'm from Poseidon Research, an AI non-profit research lab trying to scale interpretable, transparent, accountable, governable AI to create digital public goods that everyone here can eventually use. We're trying to basically open the black box. My question was, you've given us like really excellent ideas of what each sort of sector, philanthropy, non-profits, academia, and governments should do. But I'm interested, how can we sort of collaborate together so that all this comes together and means something? And also, how do we work with the for-profits in a constructive way so that we can make sure that we all benefit from this wonderful technology? Thank you.
And we're about to start flashing red on screen, so perhaps each panelist could give a final reflection in answer to that question.
Well, I will give a partial answer. For the moment, what we are trying to do is to pool the resources at the governmental level. Last year, we've created what we've called an AI Fund with Ministry of Science, Digitalization, National Center for Research and Development, and others, because we had the feeling, like you are saying, that everybody is doing something, but we had no knowledge about what we are doing, how much money we are putting into it. So for the moment, we've pulled together, once again, resources at governmental level, but probably we should go further, as you are saying, also across different sectors.
I think it's a brilliant question. And what we're doing with ICANE, but also Data Science Africa does, and AI at CAM, convene around people and projects with that purpose in mind. I think that the board that Vilas was on actually recommends ICANE as the model of working. And it's the easiest but the hardest thing to do, because focusing on the people and the projects itself, rather than the institutions running around saying, we're doing this, that's what causes all the problems, not invented here. That's massive in the NGO sector. NGOs reinventing solutions because they want to show them in their brochure. But you need to convene around the people and the projects, the voice of the customer, as Vilas said, but in this case, the customer is the people on the ground, understand what they need, and not dominate the conversation because you happen to be the one with the resource. Because the real resource is the depth and quality of the problem sets and the people who are engaged with them.
Yeah, I'll be very quick, but I think for us as the African society, I think we are really ready. What we are trying to do at the moment is to bring communities together, to collaborate together as universities, because as you see, we are isolated. We are a bit isolated from the rest of the world. Even within Africa itself, there are other institutes that are really, really behind. So the most important part that we are supposed to play, us who are already somewhere, is to make sure that we try to make the community together, the Data Science Africa, where we train the leaders of tomorrow, where we try to attract partners like the ones we have here. And also, when it comes to really problem solving, it's really to show that we have structures and which could be improved or improved later. But is to show that we are really organized and we are able to, we are open to collaboration and working together.
I'll be very quick. I love the question. I love the fact that we're here to have this conversation. What I would say, just reflecting again on the title of the session, is there are no longer things like technological problems and technology policy problems and social inequity problems. I think instead what we're very quickly moving into a world is connectivity of techno-social challenges and opportunities. That the questions that we're asking about what our AI models will do have direct impacts on the lives of people in the communities that God, Liver, and I come from, that are living their lives every single day, so far from centers of technological power, but so ready to accept what's possible when we acknowledge dignity and agency as the core parts of our AI future.
Great. Well, please join me in thanking our panel for their contributions today.